Modern knitters have more resources, patterns, and yarns than ever before, and still we're struggling with the art of fit. We're following more tutorials, instructions, and detailed patterns than ever, and still a lot of us think, why does that not fit the way I imagined it would? I've been knitting and analyzing a lot of vintage patterns recently, and they have really limited instructions, sometimes not even gauge or yarn recommendations, and yet they made these patterns work. They tailored these beautiful garments. And I was wondering, how did they do that? Did they know something that we forgot? Today I'm going to share 5 things with you that I analyzed over the last years, I want to say, that will help you create sweaters you're going to love. And if you're a modern knitter, don't leave. This is for you as well. Even an oversized boxy fit sweater needs to be fitted to your measurements. I'm going to give you an overview of the 5 most important things in my opinion. Over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to go into more details on each of these topics. So hopefully by the end of this year, we're going to have everything we need to make 2027 the year of sweaters that fit perfectly. So if you don't want to miss anything of the content, you know the drill, please like and subscribe, especially liking and commenting down below is helping the small channel grow. But enough of the commercial. Let's start with point number 1. And this is really, really important. Bodies do not scale proportionately. We all have different bodies and we're trying to squeeze them into certain size categories. And that is not limited to knitting. That is the same in ready-to-wear clothing. And that is kind of mad because we're not going to fit into one size category. Vintage knitters knew that every pattern you would get is a starting point, and then you would need to customize it for your body and your needs. I know not everyone wants these calculations, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. But just being open to the possibility of just tweaking minor things can be so helpful. There are a lot of designers out there these days who create beautiful patterns, but they're creating these patterns usually based on their body. I think it's really hard to design for bodies that are so different from theirs. I have a rather standard sized body. I never really needed to do a full bust adjustment, for example, but I have really narrow shoulders. And I don't really expect a designer to understand what that means. That is just something I have learned from my body over the course of the last few years. I'm changing my armhole shaping slightly and my neckline shaping, and that is it. That is a really tiny thing to do and a really simple thing to do. That changed the fit of my garments drastically, and it's something nobody else could have done for me. So again, I'm not saying we don't need size inclusive patterns, because we do. Please do not get me wrong. All I'm saying is even the size inclusive patterns are usually based on our bust, and our body is more than our bust measurements. And what I want to take you away from point number 1 is being open to exploring the possibilities of adjusting the patterns yourself. And with topic number 2, I want to give you a tool to do that, and that is basic blocks. If you've seen former videos on this channel, you know this is really a big topic for me at the moment. I'm used to sewing with basic blocks and designing my own patterns, and I don't know why it never occurred to me, but it took me a long while to realize that knitting works the same way. There are a lot of vintage patterns from Germany that will either have you draw them from a pattern sheet like this, or they will just give you a miniature version and you have to scale it up. Or you can create your own basic block. And I will go more into detail in next week's video on how to do that. But the takeaway from this is you can create a basic pattern that is perfect for your body, and you're just going to take all the other patterns you see out there. You don't have to become a designer. You just need this basic block, and then you're going to use the measurements from this block on every pattern, and you just need to adjust the amount of stitches you have on your needles, ideally, and you're going to get the sweater that actually fits. So don't be intimidated by the idea. It really is that simple. And as we've just talked about basic blocks, this all kind of ties into one another. Gauge. There are a lot of patterns that tell you a stitch gauge and a row gauge. I'm usually confused by the row gauge because I never get row gauge. Gauge is not the point. You can have any gauge that will change the fabric you create, but you can kind of achieve every garment or every pattern with a different gauge. You just have to adjust the numbers of stitches you're casting on and the amount of rows you're knitting. And there are vintage patterns out there that will not give you a gauge. They will just give you a block, just as I said, to draw or to upscale. And you only know the measurement you need to achieve, and then you can use any yarn. And isn't that beautiful? But it doesn't matter if it's a knitting for olive merino, if it's an indie dyer, or if it's drops or knit picks, it really doesn't matter. And as I've just said, you can create whatever you want. Well, if you want to take a tiny step into design thinking, and I'm not saying design your own patterns, but using a pattern as a starting point. That is tip number 4. And that is exactly what I'm wearing today. This pattern, or this stitch pattern, is the Fleur Tee. And this is the Fleur Tee, and we can probably all agree this is definitely not the Fleur Tee, and yet it uses the same pattern. Well, I love the Fleur Tee. It has a tiny gauge. I didn't have cotton that would fit that gauge. I knew my gauge with this yarn, so I just cast on the stitches and started knitting. I omitted the sleeves because I wanted a simple summer top. And I used the designer's pattern, but I made my own thing. I used it as a starting point, did my own thing. And maybe that's a big thing, a big change, but smaller changes could be incorporating color changes in a standard patterns, changing the color you want to use, changing the finish you want to use. I've just made a video last week. You don't have to do ribbing only because the pattern starts with ribbing. There are other options out there. If you love the shape of the sweater, but you want to change a detail, do that. Topic number 5 is construction matters more than numbers. And that is something that is really important in my opinion. Anyone can just use basic numbers and design a raglan sweater. But there are so many tiny details that go into the construction of a garment. Most important things when thinking of construction is the shoulder shaping if you're doing vintage patterns, because the sleeve has to fit in the perfect point or it's gonna look sloppy. We're talking about bust and chest measurement, and yes, chest measurement and bust are different measurements. The chest measurement is sitting just before your bust really starts, under your armpits, and the bust is the widest point of your body. And understanding that they have different widths and need to be fitted differently will take your sweater to the next level if you're not knitting really oversized garments. These 4 measurements together, your shoulder point, your chest, your bust, and your waist, will shape the first impression of the garment. So in a nutshell, what do I want you to take away from today's video? Be open-minded to change things around. Patterns are not set instructions. Your body is beautiful the way it is. It's individual and it does not have to fit a size. But don't expect a stranger understanding your body and being able to cater to all your needs. Do the little bit of extra work and create a basic block and understand how your measurements change your body from the standard body that does not exist, and what tiny adjustments you could maybe make to take your garments to the next level. You don't have to learn something fancy new. It's usually just multiplication and division and basic math. So I hope you're going to join me in the course of the next few weeks and understanding more about fit and design, so we can all have perfect fitted sweaters in 2027. Let me know what you think about the concept. If you would like to see something in particular, there's nothing set in stone yet. Next week, I'm going to share my approach to the basic block with you, and then we're going to have a new Flip Through Friday with amazing design ideas where we can put the basic block to a test. So this is going to be so exciting. Happy knitting!